Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Front Page Fitness. I'm still Eric Trexler. I'm still joined by the good Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple, and you are listening to episode number 14 of our very cool, very fresh podcast. Lauren, how are we doing tonight?
We're doing great. We have lots to discuss this evening. How are you?
I'm good, but the first thing we need to discuss is your old stomping grounds. I just got back from New York, and I know that every time I disparage a place, it inevitably results in anger, backlash, emails, and so on. So I'm just going to say diplomatically, Lauren, as a Midwesterner turned Southern gentleman, I do not believe that the big city is the place for me. I felt a little bit out of place. People move very quickly. Lauren, I don't know if you noticed that in New York. They move very, very quickly. There's not a lot of what you would call personal space in the city. You are really shoulder to shoulder, and sometimes beyond shoulder to shoulder. Sometimes shoulders exceed the shoulder boundary, and you just bump into people, which is not what I'm accustomed to down here. And Lauren, here's my life experience. People in the Midwest are genuinely friendly. These are very polite people. People in the South are somewhat friendly, but they fake the rest, right? So there's like part friendly and part fake friendly. But even with that, in the South, the most horrific rudeness you will experience is that someone will say, "Bless your heart," and they won't really mean it in the way you think they mean it. But man, people in New York are they're very candid. They're very honest about their feelings. And some might say remarkably rude. So how do you feel about that assessment of New York as a New Yorker?
Okay, so you texted me at some point over the weekend with some disparaging remarks about young children and claimed to be in the Hamptons. You are not, in fact, anywhere near the Hamptons. You were in Long Island in another location, but you never disclosed that you were actually going to New York City. So where did you go and what did you do?
First of all, I'm pretty sure you were the one disparaging young children. You asked why I was there. I said for a young child's birthday party, friend of the family, and then you went on a whole tirade. So I have the receipts to prove that.
False, but okay, we can move on.
But yeah, I flew into the city, spent a little bit of time there, went to a part of Long Island that you do not consider the Hamptons.
No one considers it the Hamptons, but sure.
I was told I was going to the Hamptons. After looking at a map, I agree with you. It does not appear to be the Hamptons. I went to a place near the Hamptons, but if you call it the Hamptons, I believe it gives it an air of extra wealth and superiority. So we called it the Hamptons for the weekend. And then a little bit of time in the city. My flight got canceled due to an act of God, according to insurers. Basically, tremendous flooding that was occurring. So I got to spend an extra day near LaGuardia Airport, which was really just the perfect icing on the cake there. The cherry on top is a nice airport-side hotel near LaGuardia over in Queens.
So you were in Manhattan for some period of time, and that's what you're complaining about?
I'm not complaining. I'm making a set of observations and saying there are cultural differences across these great United States. Some of those states are more hospitable to people of my temperament and my walking speed, and others are not.
So I will agree that slow walkers are terrible humans. You got to move. You don't stand and look up.
You're not agreeing with me on that. You're agreeing with New York on that.
Yes.
It sounds like. Okay.
100%. I mean, it's very annoying when you're trying to get from point A to point B and you have people looking around you like, wow, that building is tall. Okay, cool. Yeah. Move on.
Do you know what they call the space between point A and point B? They call that living your life. So,
which you're used to driving.
I am used to driving. That is true. Yeah.
So yeah, if you're living the life of walking to work, taking the subway to work, hustle. Let's move it along.
Everybody take your time. Everyone relax. And if you can't be polite, at least fake it. That's the official life lesson for me. All right, Lauren.
Yeah, politeness is not a thing because we're too busy.
Yeah. Yeah, they made that clear.
Very busy, very important. Step aside.
Yeah, I got that. I got all that. That was reinforced very heavily. All right, Lauren, we got stuff to cover, fitness stuff. We got, first of all it says on the outline is dry scooping. Familiar with the topic? I have no idea what you want to say about it.
So I was not familiar with the topic, and while looking for headlines to cover in our episode, I came across an article that was actually really reasonable, so I didn't include it. But it mentioned the fact that, we get a lot of these trends on TikTok, like this and that and whatever, and dry scooping was one of the things that were mentioned as TikTok trends, which I was not familiar with. I clicked on it, and I was very disturbed that people are consuming creatine and pre-workout without water.
Okay.
What?
I am going to zag a little bit as you zig. So I want to acknowledge, Lauren, that I became aware of dry scooping. I don't know where you've been. I became aware of this in like 2014. And for 10 years, I was like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and felt very strongly about that. But I did reach a point actually within the last couple months where I got a bottle of creatine, and creatine never dissolves all that well. But this bottle, there's the different type I got, different brand, was particularly bad at dissolving. And I just got sick of like all the grittiness at the bottom of the drink, and frankly, not being able to even get all of the, like, I would finish the drink to the extent I could tip it all the way back. Nothing else is coming out. And I could see still plenty of creatine just like in the bottle. So I was like, you know what? For this particular use case, I'm going to try to dry scoop. And frankly, it makes the creatine experience a lot better, in the sense that I don't find a lot of creatine just sitting in the bottle at the end. And I don't need to like pretend that it's dissolving in the 20 ounces of beverage when I just drank 20 ounces of beverage and still didn't get my 5 grams of creatine. So that's a long-winded way of saying I'm actually converted over to a single instance of dry scooping, and that's just creatine.
So would you put the creatine in your mouth and then chase it with a beverage, or are you just going full dry?
No, I'm chasing with a beverage. This is not the like cinnamon challenge from like 10 years ago.
Then it's not dry scooping.
Well, I believe it is. I think if a dry powder is being scooped directly into your mouth and your mouth closes one time, I believe that is the official definition of dry scooping. So I think people in the comments will let you know how wrong you are, but that is dry scooping.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, do you think there's some kind of like, do you have to like wait 10 minutes before you have your next sip of water or something?
No, but based on my very limited reading of the topic, the theory was if you have it without a liquid, then it's going to absorb faster.
Oh,
and so
I've never heard anyone talk about that.
So we're talking full scoops of pre-workout, like down the hatch, dry, and that is upsetting.
That's crazy. No, that's crazy. My understanding with dry scooping was that people either hated the taste of their supplement and just wanted to get it over with, just throw it down the hatch, or maybe the supplement in some cases had solubility issues, like I mentioned. Those are all, I think, fairly reasonable use cases, but no, I've never even heard the justification of this nonsense of it being better. And also, who cares? Like your pre-workout is going to get into your system pretty quickly. If you're that worried about it, go get some caffeinated gum. You'll get there about 10 minutes faster.
I went through a caffeine gum stage around the same time I went through the pre-workout / Monster stage.
Yeah, those seem correlated.
Totally.
So why did you go with the gum? Were you just sick of having beverages, or did you really want the 10-minute head start on response time?
No, it would be like unrelated to working out, just in the lab, caffeine gum. You get these ones on Amazon. It's like for the military.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was consuming too much caffeine. Goes without saying.
But I guess what I'm getting at is why not just have another beverage? Just easier, convenient.
Yeah. Cheap.
Yeah, or I mean, you could take the maximalist approach, get some kind of caffeine patch on your skin, do the caffeine gum, caffeine beverage all at the same time, and just really work all those routes of administration.
IV.
Yep. All right, Lauren. The next thing on the outline is aura farming, and I honestly have no idea where you're going to go with this one. I'm assuming this is just fully fundamentally off topic.
Yes, but
Okay.
have you seen these videos? So this was brought to my attention. It's not really fitness related, but
Okay.
there's apparently this viral video of these people rowing in Indonesia in competition, and all of the boats. Is it a boat when you're rowing?
Yeah, yeah.
It's still a boat. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're talking competitive rowing, but there is a boy on the front dancing.
Yes,
And
there's an 11-year-old boy.
correct. This has gone extremely viral, and many people are doing kind of spoofs of this, standing on the top of their car, like trying to do the same dance, or it's a whole thing now. But the whole aura farming thing was not something I had heard of because I'm not 17 years old. And apparently this is basically like your so to have aura points or to like lose aura points is all about being cool online. And so this guy is he's aura farming, meaning like
Cultivating this aura.
giving cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you said giving the way that like a Gen Zer would say it.
Right. Well, this is probably like Gen Alpha. Is it Alpha or Alpha Alpha? I don't know. What's the next one?
I couldn't tell you. I'm not really tapped into the generational wars here. But I do notice, Lauren, that as you grab more of these headlines, I feel like you are begrudgingly, time and time again, being dragged into modernity and essentially Gen Z or Gen Alpha slang and trends. And this is not a safe place for you or us.
No, it's not. And I mean, I've already discussed my issues with their haircuts and the socks and slides at the gym. And now we're just inventing new words for cool. And then, apparently it's like if you're trying too hard, then that's not good too. And so they need to invent a new word for poser, which is like you're losing aura points. And I can't. This is why I can't be on TikTok. It's not okay.
Yeah. I mean, it says here that his dance is quote unquote full of swag, which I think is kind of the millennial analogous term that had some cultural purchase for a while. As you can tell, I talk about pop culture as if I'm an anthropologist. I observed some of these things when I was doing my ethnographic study of millennials in America in the contemporary times that it was happening. Wouldn't call myself a participant in society necessarily, but I was there. But yeah, I just hope the kids are having fun, staying safe, staying out of trouble. I fully don't understand this, but the young gentleman seems to be having a good time, seems confident, seems happy with the attention coming his way. And Lauren, I would also say this essentially is at the intersection of sport and fitness because people are rowing that boat, so that counts.
Yes, but as an extension of my hating on the younger generations, the one of the other headlines I've pulled was, should you be Fibermaxxing with 2 X's? And
Okay, so go on. Let me begin. Before you explain what that is, I'm going to go in cold and say no. But anyway, go on.
I mean, this is just an example of somebody unnecessarily renaming something that's called just eat fiber. Like add some fruits and vegetables to your diet. But because it's TikTok, we have to say Fibermaxxing with 2 X's. Tell me why.
What's that a play on? Because I've heard people adding maxing to words as like what do you call it? like the like a
A
portion of the word.
suffix?
Yeah, like as a suffix. So
Okay.
is there a particular root word that this like caught on with? Okay, it says first came smell maxing and then sleep maxing. Don't forget flavor maxing. And now the newcomer is fiber maxing.
I hate this.
I know, but
Hey.
Lauren, I just want to tell you as a friend,
No.
this is maybe a conversation that shouldn't be happening on a recording, but you're getting dangerously close to what happens with every generation, which is like once their generation is no longer the arbiter of popular culture and slang, they immediately grow resentful of the changes that are occurring without any conscious appreciation of the fact that this is exactly what happened when their generation was developing their own slang in their formative years. So I'm just a little bit worried that you may be falling into a trap that's very alluring. It captures most generations, probably all of them. But I just want to hold up that mirror and ask you if that's what you want to become on air.
When it's reasonable, yeah. Like, stop inventing a word for no reason. Stop it.
Yeah, but that
And
that
why
is
two X's?
inventing words for no reason is the entire premise of slang. So you're basically like saying, listen, I reached my 30s. Slang is over. We're going to do a moratorium. We're going to freeze it. And what was slang in 2012 is now permanent slang, and there will be no additions, is kind of what the policy sounds like.
I acknowledge that some of the slang in our youth was really stupid.
Yeah.
I fully acknowledge that.
Well,
But-
that is true. Like, I do want to acknowledge that you probably were like me in the sense that I didn't even participate in my own generation's slang for the most part because I was like, this is too much. We're pushing our limits.
But
I'd
we're
imagine you're the
talking
same way.
about we're talking about, I don't know. Chill? Is that us? Or is that before our time?
In what context?
Like, relax.
Okay, because then chill became cool. Like it became a synonym for cool. And people would say, yeah, that's chill.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other problem with all of this is there's no respect for grammar.
No, grammar's dead.
Like, so nouns and verbs become interchangeable.
Yeah.
But I think I'm particularly offended by the double X because there's no reason for it. And like with all this maxing thing, it's like, look maxing is improving your physical appearance. Why
Yeah.
do we need a word for that? I guess glow up was Gen Z's version of that. So
Yeah.
now Alpha needs theirs. No. I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think to reiterate your point, the real dangerous thing here is that it what I consider to be extremely important is it makes me look like an idiot. Because without looking into this article, I said, no, you should not be Fibermaxxing, because I assumed it was going to be like the 30 raw eggs a day thing, and it was going to be like, hey, eat 100 grams of fiber a day, and then just have permanent gas for the rest of your life. But this sounds to me like Fibermaxxing, allegedly, is eating slightly more than the daily minimum for fiber. It's like, someone's like, yeah, I tried to eat more than 25 grams a day of fiber. It's like, yeah, that's like a human diet. It generally should be more than 25 grams of fiber. So it sounds like Fibermaxxing, in a very literal sense, is just eating the recommended daily intake of fiber and maybe trying to go slightly above because you just eat like some fruits and vegetables. So in
And I
that
guess
case,
if they're trying to make fiber cool, then I'm on board. So I'll take back everything I just said.
yeah, they're making it cool, but I do think it's kind of problematic because someone like me will take that literally and is going to have at least one very bad day. They're
Yeah,
gonna
that's
go
right.
They're going to say, well, if I'm really going to be a maximalist about this, I'm going to go get some Metamucil at the store. I can have nearly infinite amounts of this, fiber supplement. So why not have a 200 gram of protein, 200 gram of fiber a day worth of eating? That will last exactly one day, but it'll be a very bad day. All right. So Fibermaxxing is technically fine, but linguistically
Should we just
a pain point.
pause and give a brief fiber recommendations so it can be slightly helpful to anyone listening?
Sure. Yeah. For me, the number I usually say like 14 or 15 grams per 1,000 calories in your diet. That's if you want to go the hard way, and actually try to scale it up and down. Usually the easy target is somewhere between 25 and 35-ish is going to be kind of on the low to adequate side. I usually tell people, though, frankly, somewhere between 30 and 60 if you want to err toward higher. And where you fall on that is going to be dictated basically by GI symptoms, right? So if you notice that every time you get up into the 60 range, you feel kind of gassy and bloated, that's too high for you. Drop it down to 50, see how you do. If you find that if you go below 30, that, you're not happy with your stool frequency and consistency, maybe you need to increase it a little bit. So basically those are kind of the types of GI variables you're thinking of. Am I gassy? Am I feeling bloated? What's my GI or my bowel movement frequency and consistency? You're going to find your sweet spot, and we're not trying to thread a needle here. Plenty of room to kind of work within that range. What do you normally tell people?
Yeah, I think that for most people, we can just start with saying, let's eat a variety of fruits and vegetables. And that's a really good place to start.
Right.
And because for most people who are concerned, it probably means you're not doing that. So then once we incorporate those fruits and vegetables and whole grains, whatever, and then we want to have a more detailed discussion about it, then that's fine. But typically when I hear people say, oh, you need to prioritize protein, you need to prioritize fiber, it's really you're talking to someone who does not have a remotely nutritious diet. And so we need to dial in those sort of basic things of, let's eat more whole foods, let's eat more fruits and vegetables, and that the fiber kind of comes along with that. Yeah,
for sure. So yeah, I like that. That was useful. I gave the numerical approach. You gave the qualitative approach. We call that utility in the fitness business.
Sweet.
Last off-topic thing I want to say is I just want to give a shout out. Tonight I'm drinking Mountain Dew Baja Blast, 0 sugar. Baja Blast, this is not the original that we talked about on the show previously. That was made in the 40s for the sole purpose of being a mixer with whiskey and other corn-based liquors. This is a spin on the traditional classic. It is lovely. The reason I bring this up, Lauren, is we got a email about the history of Mountain Dew. I thought I was going way back in the archives talking about Mountain Dew in the 1940s.
Yeah.
Apparently this goes back to like the 1700s, the term Mountain Dew being used in, I believe, Scotland. But basically same kind of deal. The folks were distilling things, whiskey-type beverages, essentially moonshine in Scotland before it became cool to moonshine in the Appalachians of America. So all that is to say, I wanted to give a tip of the cap to our Scottish friends who were making Mountain Dew in the 1700s, and a tip of the cap to our Appalachian friends who continue to carry the tradition forward today.
That sounded like the strangest ad for Mountain Dew that will ever be.
I really wish that Mountain Dew would finally step up and sponsor the show, but nonetheless, here we are, sponsorless. All right, Lauren, we need to get on to something. This is extremely fitness related. We are at the intersection of fitness, headlines, culture. Frankly, not a place I want to be based on the subject matter, but it can't go without discussing it. As much as I'd love to just move away from this and have no comment whatsoever. So your headline that you put in here is gym is reserved exclusively for females aged 12 to 24 from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Monday to Friday. So here's what I'm going to insist on, Lauren. Given that you are a woman and I am not, I want to have you comment on this first. I will simply observe, try to figure out how to navigate these waters and put forward an opinion in a way that is least inflammatory. And why don't you take this one away?
Yeah, this was a very surprising headline. And apparently a member of this gym had kind of shared this message that she received from our gym saying, we have a new policy. We're writing to inform you that from now on, if you're over the age of 24, you won't be permitted to come to the gym between the hours of 4 and 7 p.m. on Monday through Friday.
But just that little time window. It's right. Like the single time when everybody goes to the gym.
Yeah. And so most people apparently were supportive and said, this person's justified with the outrage, but others said, well, they're probably trying to attract more influencers during that hour for 3 hours for some free marketing, or they can't exercise the same time as men without being hit on. I don't know how.
This is so much worse. I was gonna ask, like, what could the justifications be? Those are worse than anything I could have concocted, because if it's like, hey, we want to bring in influencers, like 12-year-olds should not be influencers. This is chaos. Like the range is not appropriate for that use case. But then also if it's just like I totally get why people say like, hey, we're creating this like fitness studio. It's just for women. It's for people who, for women who don't feel comfortable working out in spaces for reasons you mentioned and several others. We want to just make a woman-focused facility here. More power to you. But the thing I don't get is, like, with that justification in mind, what happens when some ancient, washed-up old 25-year-old woman walks into the gym? And how does that alter any of the things that were said at the beginning of that sentence? And before the emails come in, I'm being facetious. Like, why are we saying, like, hey, once you're over 25, this is no longer a safe space for our 12 to 24-year-olds? Like, what is happening here?
And how many 12 to 24-year-olds are attending the gym between the hours of 4 p.m. and 7 p.m.? Because the majority of that age group probably does not have a 9-to-5 job. And so they don't need to go during those after work hours.
I was going to say, yeah, like, I feel like a lot of those folks are going to the gym, like, way earlier than that. Back when I was, like, fully self-employed and wasn't doing the whole university thing, like, people in that age range would, like, really congregate in the gym seemingly from, like, 1 to 3. I don't know. I would walk in and be like, shouldn't you people be in school? Like, what's happening here? Maybe it was in the summer, but nonetheless, 4 to 7 p.m., as I alluded to, Monday through Friday, that is peak. Like, work is over. I got to hit the gym so I can get home and do all my adult stuff for the night. Go shopping, make dinner, take care of the house, all that. So you got a very narrow window there. If you work like a 8 to 4, 9 to 5, you can't just say, whatever, I'll just run in there at like 9 p.m. tonight and make it work. I mean, some people do that, but it's definitely not the norm. A lot of people, if they're working out at 9, they're going to be kind of wired for a few hours after that. Like, this is not the play. This is not the move whatsoever.
And one of the other comments, which I find pretty absurd, was, teenage girls are a high risk of stopping exercise. So, there's a purpose in providing a space just for them. And like, okay, but what about the rest of the population? And if we're really going to talk about the health risks of not exercising, that would probably apply to women that are slightly older than 25, just to throw it out there. Like, hey, maybe we would want to cater to the women who are older, much older than 25, and provide a space for them.
Given your background in psychology and logical existence as a human, help me understand what I'm feeling. Because I feel like if someone came out and said, hey, I'm creating a boutique fitness studio and We are really laser focused on this demographic, female, age 12 to 24, and we are actually going to restrict our membership to that. So that's their policy from day one. For some reason, that feels to me less egregious than just like sending a note to your gym and saying like, "Oh no, I'm still going to collect your money. You're just not welcome here between 4 and 7." That's not crazy, right? Like, how do you feel about those two different scenarios?
I mean, I agree with you. I also think if you wanted to create a kind of youth fitness space, that makes a ton of sense to me. I mean, I don't know that like most gyms that I have been to, I think you can't go under 18 without a parent for the most part. So this whole idea that you would just be able to go at the age of 12 by yourself, that's not very common in my experience. But I mean, I fully agree that we should encourage youth to work out. And if you're in a traditional high school setting, at least my experience was girls never went in the weight room, although one existed. And so I understand and support encouraging that. But this is a commercial gym.
Yeah.
And this isn't a community center. This isn't a school. So the messaging is there's some sort of bizarre disconnect here. And I feel like if you're going to institute a policy like that, you better have a pretty good reason and you better be able to articulate it.
Yeah, this is certainly a strange one. And again, I don't really have a well-formed opinion on the idea of like creating a private facility that has very restrictive sign-up criteria with regards to like age and gender. I understand why people do it. Those reasons make sense to me. I also understand the people who push back, and I don't know. Like, I'm not a constitutional lawyer. I'm not an ethicist. There's some questions in life that I'm like, man, that seems complicated. Can I opt out? Like, I don't want to like put out some definitive, declaration on this. But the one thing I do feel pretty good about is saying like, come on, man. Like, if the gym's open to these people, especially when you're creating this arbitrary thing where like for some reason it's a 25-year-old woman can't go to the gym after work, like now you're kind of like, what are we talking about? What are we doing here? So this, I appreciate this gym owner for at least giving me some low-hanging fruit on this topic to kind of take a swing at, because all the other stuff gets complicated and I don't know. There's some things that like I don't really know how to like thread that needle ethically and all that kind of stuff, but this one, I want to thank them for making such a terrible policy that I feel comfortable bashing it. So that was, I'm interpreting that as a personal gift to me. All right, Lauren, next we have a question here, or a statement, I should say, from your old stomping grounds, the New York Post. And it says, how your calf muscles can predict your chance of dementia. Now, this is a new one for me, and whenever I see a headline like this, I start to kind of impute, like, okay, what is a not dumb thing that could be getting kind of like twisted, turned around, and spun in such a way? So why don't you let me in on what they're talking about here, and I'll try to get a sense of how dumb you think it is, or how smart you think it is.
That's super dumb.
Yeah, I figured.
I mean, bottom line, people who exercise more tend to be at less risk for dementia. So that's where they're going with that. But the journey of the article doesn't really get there for a while. And there's a stop along the way where we discuss measuring calf circumference, and what we should be aiming for in terms of calf circumference, which is something that I personally have never considered or measured or encouraged anyone else that I've ever coached or known to measure. But ultimately, it basically says, your calf muscles are functional. Okay, I can get on board with that. And here are some recommendations about, average calf circumference for men and women. And we should focus on calf circumference because it can be a useful indicator of sarcopenia. And that's where you've lost me, because we're going back to the grip strength and the other things. And we're saying, okay, well, let's focus on this one thing that might be measurable, that maybe a study or two or many has measured. But then the wrap up is there's an association between sarcopenia and cognitive impairment. So we took a lot of jumps there to get from calf specific muscularity to cognitive impairment and dementia.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the first sentences I read as I was scrolling through this, I'm pretty sure is not true.
Shocking. No.
Correct me if
not
I'm
the New
wrong
York
here.
Post.
But the soleus, I don't think that's actually a knee flexor.
Where did they say that?
When I was going to remark on how useless this paragraph is, because it just says how calf muscles work. Then it's like 3 sentences that are like your calves exist and they do things. But yeah, I think even in that, they only had a few sentences to work with. I think they kind of botched it. But anyway, no, it's this is one of those things that there's just no reason to write an article this poorly or in such a misleading way. Because like you said, I mean, there's 2 ways to look at this, right? Because first of all, if you make the intentional health-oriented decision to be more active, you likely will reduce your risk of dementia, right? But also, like, if you just happen to be healthy, broadly speaking, even without making an intentional decision to do exercise on a regular basis, there's a good chance that you will both be more ambulatory in nature and also probably have a slightly lower risk of dementia. And so in any case, we're kind of just looking at this very broad correlate that is just loosely associated with general health, ambulation, activity level, etc. And when you write a headline like that, and even the article itself kind of leads you to believe, kind of like we were joking earlier, how all these studies correlate grip strength with longevity. So everyone's out there like, how am I going to get the strongest forearms known to man so I can live to be 200? This is just super misleading. It makes you feel like you should be doing calf raises all day, which is just not a remotely defensible link here as it pertains to reducing your dementia risk. And like, it's not even like we're being uncharitable. The very end of it just says how to strengthen calf muscles. It says daily calf raises, heel drops, and jump rope. So it's literally saying like there is something unique and special and powerful about having strong calves that is directly in a causative way reducing your risk of developing dementia, which is just utter rubbish. It's just rubbish, Lauren.
Also, some very overweight people have huge calves. So if we're just going calf circumference as the marker, then that's not even a sign that you're very physically active.
Yeah, I mean, so Lauren, you know the whole backstory with me, right? So got into fitness when I was 12, was like in super good shape for essentially the ages of 12 to like 32. Last couple years, I had to take a medication that causes weight gain and had a surgery that made it so I really couldn't do any form of exercise for a really extended period of time. So imagine that. I got fat, and we were at a conference, and people were like, bro, your calves look huge. Good for you, man. What have you been doing? I was like, I just stopped exercising and got fat. Like that is my my super strong calf routine. And it works better than when I was like a pro bodybuilder doing calf raises 3 times a week. So go figure. That is the formula. Now, how did I feel about my general health? Not so great. I think my risk of dementia was skyrocketing, as was my risk for about every chronic disease out there. So, yeah, just to reinforce your point, I have the anecdotal evidence to support you. Yeah. But I do appreciate all the kind comments from people who, instead of saying, oh my God, Eric, you look so much fatter than I've ever seen you, they just said, hey, nice calves. That's a good way to do it. Not the New York approach. That is a Midwestern approach. and that's why I liked it.
That's true. And this is something that we spoke about when we were together in person in April, I believe.
Yes.
And we were not in New York, nor were we in the Midwest. We were in the South.
Yep. We were in Texas. Texas is its own thing.
South adjacent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's technical. Well, whatever. Anyway, but you were not only getting major compliments in person, you were also getting major compliments online. So they could have come from anywhere.
That is true. Yeah, it got weird for a minute there. Like my weight kind of reached a peak and is going down because I'm not taking that medication anymore and I'm able to exercise without the severe crippling pain again. But it did get to a weird point where every time we would try to post something en masse from like, we had all these pictures that we banked from during that visit. And it was like every other post, there would be like either a tremendous amount of emphasis on how good I look or several very scathing comments about how bloated and out of shape I am. And I was like, there's just total whiplash between like, wait a minute, do I look my all-time best or my all-time worst? And the answer is my all-time worst, but still I prefer the former comment over the latter. But yeah, that was an interesting, and that was just like an interesting experience for fitness in general. Like the social commentary was bountiful from that. 'Cause like that is one of the upsides of being if you're in the fitness space as a dude who lifts, you have a lot of wiggle room to just like gain a lot of fat, and people will be like, oh, I'm sure there's like a method to the madness. I'm sure he's lifting a ton. I bet he looks great still. Like, good for him.
Getting back into powerlifting.
Yeah, and I feel like that doesn't necessarily get extended, to women quite as frequently. And by that, I mean ever at all. So that was one interesting kind of social observation I made there. The other one was like people that made like just genuinely like very nasty comments and would like follow me around. It was like every post that I was just physically in that was not about my body or weight gain or weight loss or anything of the sort. It would just be like, our deadlifts do deadlifts hurt your back? Was like the point of the video. People would just, on every video, repeated ones, make the same comment about how fat I got. And I just responded to them and I just said like, yeah, I did. Like, here's what's going on. And like, I gained weight. I'll almost certainly lose it. Like, that's life. And then people were like, oh yeah, like I didn't like want to make a big deal about it. Like, dude, you've been posting the same like fat shaming content on the last 4 posts I made, following me around on the internet. Like, what do you want from me? And then
I didn't know that you got fat shamed. I thought it was all positive because the only comments I saw were like, he's looking jacked, he's looking amazing, he's looking beefy. Like,
there's no question that I think because we do have a very like I don't say this to be like pandering, but our audience is better than most. Like I just think the type of content we make kind of filters out a lot of people who have kind of shittier vibes like that in terms of like who would be harassing folks on the internet for gaining some weight. So like there's no question the ratio was very skewed. It was all the vast majority was very positive. But there were a few people who didn't just like say something negative, but would every time I posted say the same negative thing. And I'm like, at a certain point, I was like, what do you want from me? Like, I'm not even denying it. Like, you're right. It's just not really central to the post here. It was just a very strange interaction because I don't know if they wanted me to get upset about it or deny it or explain myself. I have no idea. But anyway. Calf
it's
muscles.
Funny too because what I will say with people, especially with celebrities, people with large platforms, and then they lose some weight, right? And immediately it's like plastic surgery, Ozempic, and then admit it. So if you admit it, then it's like you're a cheater. How could you do that? And if you don't admit it, then you're a liar. So there's no winning really. And
now that you put it that way, I do want to come clean, and I alluded to this previously, but if you're wondering if I'm natty, like, did I really gain all that fat without the use of pharmaceutical drugs? I have to come clean. I did take a medication which is known to cause fairly substantial fat gain. So I will consult with the bodybuilding organization in which I still have an active pro card and check with them to see if they want to revoke that now. But I did get some pharmaceutical assistance with all that fat gain. So I'm sorry. I'm coming clean. And if that makes me a cheater in your eyes and you were hoping that someone could gain all that fat naturally, I'm sure someone can, but it wasn't me.
Thank you for your transparency.
Yeah.
The listeners appreciate it.
All right, Lauren, we got I suppose a related question here. Should we use smart scales?
Yeah, I mean, so, if we're talking about wanting to change our body composition in either direction, I get a lot of questions about this and say, well, should I focus on the body fat percentage and the muscle mass, quote unquote, that is spit out by some of these scales? And you and I have used a variety of tools over the years. And of course, the lab-based tools are not something that folks will have access to at home. But even if they did, I'm not sure I would recommend it for most cases, mostly because there's a ton of variability with these. And so we look at what's available at home. It's typically going to be a BIA type scale where you're standing on the scale and it's basically only using your lower body, and it's heavily influenced by fluid, meaning if you had a higher sodium meal the night before, or if you're dehydrated, or if you just drank a bunch of water, then it can affect what will spit out as muscle mass or body fat percentage, or just general weight as well. I think sometimes we tend to overestimate the I don't even want to say accuracy, but utility of scale weight. And so once we acknowledge that, and then we start to bring in these other metrics like body fat percentage or changing daily BMI or body water, I don't think that is very useful. And we've talked before about other things we measure, like should we be tracking calories burned or steps taken throughout the day? Should we be tracking our food intake? Should we be tracking our sleep? Should we be tracking our heart rate? And then this is another thing, right? So I would say, while scale weight is a good tool, it's not required. You can certainly lose weight, change your body composition without stepping on the scale. It's a good, fairly consistent measure if you do it frequently enough and you kind of ignore those fluctuations, which are probably noise that might mean, from the day to day. So that's why we'd say, hey, take a weekly average, or, if you're on your period and you know that you're going to retain some water during that period of time, then we can kind of throw out that data. Great. That's a good data point. But I don't think it's particularly useful to start adding in all of these other components. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, with any kind of tool, with any kind of measurement, you always have to ask yourself, what are you going to do with this? And if you don't have a very good, clear answer, then, that tells you a lot, right? So for the average person, I generally wouldn't put a lot of reliance on using a scale that tracks body fat percentage, because generally speaking, if I talk to them, just having worked with clients, we'll sit down and say, hey, what's important to you? And rarely does someone ever say, I really need to be 11% body fat. I mean, they may have a goal in mind, but what they really want is, I want my health metrics to improve. I want to look a certain way visually. I want this shirt to fit a certain way. And so as I talk with this person in real life back and forth, we kind of gravitate toward the conclusion it doesn't really matter what body fat you have. And frankly, like, I've probably said this a million times, but I've done studies at my former lab. We specialized in body composition analysis, and we would do certain studies, one in particular, where we would bring people around literally the same morning, and we would measure them on like 6 different body composition devices. DEXA, BOD, POD, BIS, BIA, calipers, you name it. And we would give them their 6 numbers. And, in this population, sometimes we would sit down and we'd say, okay, on this one you were 28% body fat, and then on this one you were 31, on this one you were 34, on this one you were 35, and on this one you were 38. So they would have a range of 28 to 38% body fat measured literally the same day, literally in the same conditions. And they're like, so what is my body fat? And I would say, exactly. Like, I mean, what we have is this whole different set of instruments with different assumptions and different methods and different, calculations to try to estimate this body fat percentage number. And the reality is the more you measure body fat, the less you will actually commit to a body fat percentage. So like back when I was competing in bodybuilding and people would be like, how's your prep going? What body fat are you? I would say, I am currently about 11% if I jumped on a DEXA. So kind of like any estimate I would give would be specific to a particular type of measurement, because there is just so much variation from one to the other. And frankly, like I said, in most cases, the number is functionally useless. The only caveat I would add is I've been involved with multiple projects of like developing fitness apps that try to provide kind of guidance as you go of like, hey, we ought to be increasing calories this much, reducing calories that much. And one of the things that I've always been open to in these various app projects is if we can find a way, we certainly, there's a very straightforward way in these types of application projects. The one I'm working on currently is with Built with Science, which is Jeremy Etier's company. But body weight is a really important input, and the more weight data we can get, the better, because we're fueling an algorithm with it. It's like we are doing something with this, and I'm always open to the idea of pulling in more data. So if we were able to kind of, have a reliable piece of equipment that was feeding in body fat data, of course I'd be happy to use that to kind of improve the algorithmic function. Currently, with a lot of the products on the market, we're not quite there yet, but it is a possibility I'm open to in the future. So the reason I say that is there is a possibility that at some time in the future, I actually will figure out a way to to pull in some BIA data or some other kind of smart scale data and say, actually bring that in. Not because we're going to treat it as gospel, but because we are going to use that in a way that if we can figure out a way to meaningfully improve the way the different algorithms work, we'd love to have it. But in terms of using it to get that number and interpret it literally, I'm totally with you.
Yeah, and I would say if you are looking to get something like a DEXA scan every year, that is gold standard for bone density, right? So
Yeah.
if there are concerns about bone health, or if you have a family history of bone loss, osteopenia, osteoporosis, that might be indicated for you. But that's not something that makes sense to do more than once a year, because you're not going to see meaningful changes. And while we use this, you've probably heard that it's gold standard for quote unquote lean mass, which we sometimes use interchangeably with muscle colloquially. And on a study level, at the group level, yes, we do that because it's sort of the best we've got. But at an individual level, getting regular scans and paying for them, it's nowhere near as useful in tracking your metrics in other ways. So if we're saying you as an individual, right, we want to lose weight or we want to gain muscle, then I would focus much more on scale weight as one metric, progress pictures in the same clothing and the same lighting, same kind of conditions on a let's say no more frequently than monthly for most people. And then how your clothes fit day to day, you're going to feel that. And if you want to get more into the weeds than that, we could do a waist circumference measure. I typically would never say you should start measuring your calf circumference or arms or much else. Even calipers, right? So I've done a lot of caliper measures. And I mean, that's a disaster because it's so easy to be so, I mean, like just the way you do it, you can get one measure and you can do it again and it can be 5 millimeters off, especially if you have somebody who has a fair amount of body fat. It's quite easy to do in leaner folks, but otherwise it's the wild, wild west. But if you get really good doing one skin fold on yourself, I don't know if I've ever even really recommended it to anyone, but I've always just thought, if you get really good at doing like the abdominal skin fold on yourself and then do that every now and then, I could get on board with that as like another metric that you like would potentially be reasonable to add to the mix if you really want to kind of get down into something beyond the other things I mentioned.
Yeah. It all depends on, there's some people that, it almost brings them peace of mind to do a little bit more objective tracking. So like you said, like the most extreme thing I've ever done based on a person's goals and their temperament and their interest level is I have had someone who I recommended tracking both the circumference and the skin fold of like their arms and their thighs, so we could basically say, okay, well, based on the overall circumference and the amount of, fat thickness, we can make some pretty detailed inferences about not what your body fat percentage is, but are we losing fat? Are we gaining muscle in those areas? Right.
Right.
Yeah. Just to kind of reiterate and kind of riff on a couple of things you said, I do want to kind of caution people, as you alluded to, like, yes, DEXA's gold standard, but I still wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into the body fat percentage if, well, I could end the sentence there. So, period. Especially if you have what I would call a fairly, if your body fat is very far from the population average in either direction. So what you tend to find on DEXA is it is still, there's still a bunch of equations and calculations and algorithms working on the output. It's not like a purely objective measure that is naive of other inputs. And so what I'm getting at by that is there's kind of like a sweet spot or range in which it is like maximally validated just based on the process of validating it. And they did not validate DEXAs just using a bunch of like bodybuilders with 4% body fat or people with like 65% body fat. And so, as is the case with many kind of outputs that have some kind of predictive elements or regression-based elements or anything of the sort, as you start getting into the boundaries, either very, very high or very, very low, things start to get a little bit more wonky with the kind of estimates that you get. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing is, like you said, circumferences, things like that. It's my same kind of thing. Like, I may recommend it to someone who's just really, really, really into it and just loves doing it. For the most part, if it's not fueling an algorithm and getting pulled in for some kind of calculation process, I usually tell people, hey, let's just focus on what you came here for, which is you want to look a certain way, take your progress pictures, see what things are looking like in the mirror, see how your clothing is feeling. If there's some performance indices that you care about, let's keep an eye on those. But yeah, tracking is one of those things where I think broadly speaking, there's good evidence that as long as you are not in a kind of high risk stratification in terms of your, comfort with your body image, relationship with food and things like that, if you are in kind of if you do a risk stratification and you're very high risk, maybe you have a history of disordered eating or, pretty severe body image concerns, we probably want to go with a pretty minimalist approach to tracking only the things that are absolutely necessary. And even that, we're doing it pretty delicately. But outside of that instance, if you're fairly low risk in that regard. There's pretty substantial, pretty robust evidence that self-monitoring is a very helpful thing as you pursue fitness goals. But the way you approach that could take many, many different forms. So I'm all for kind of individualizing that and just making sure that the worst thing you could possibly do is have false confidence in data. Like I used to tell my clients all the time, like back when I had like a big full client roster, I would always have clients who come up to me and, just based on the audience from which clients were kind of selected, they were very analytical people almost always. And they would say, I'm going to go get my body composition tested using this method. And they might be asking, they might be telling, they might be pretending to ask, but actually telling. And they would let me know. And I would say, that's fine. I can't stop you. But here's the deal. I would say, we're going to set these rules on the front end. I know you're going to get this done now, and I know you're going to get it done in 6 months. If those scans tell you that you made the progress of a lifetime over those 6 months, and you just are a completely different person after 6 months of working with me, and you gained all this muscle and you lost all this fat, I promise not to take that seriously. I will not take the credit for it. I will give you my honest, objective assessment of how your progress actually has been over that 6 month period. I'm not just going to say, hey, the data say I'm great. Look at me. I should be charging double. However, the inverse is also true. So we're going to talk about your progress before the results come in, because I am not going to be held responsible for some nonsense measurement error that's going to have you basically spiraling and believing that you just wasted the last 6 months, even though every indicator we could possibly lean on says you are in way better shape than when you started. So I would always tell them, I'm not going to take the glory. I'm not going to take the blame. We're going to call it straight, and we're going to actually find some more meaningful indices along the way to assess how your progress is going.
Yeah, and I think that's really the potential major downside is we get so tied to one metric and one number. And I mean, one of the good thing about the progress pictures or how your clothes fit is there's no real number, right? Yeah. So that allows it to kind of be what it is and be what you see. And the same thing with, looking at, okay, I gained strength, right? So does that we don't have a good way to say, and therefore that means you gained X muscle mass or you lost X body fat percentage. But we have that as a good indicator. Okay, you're making progress. It's probably a good sign that you did put on. But then once we start saying, okay, this particular assessment of how many kilograms of lean mass do I have, or what is my body fat percentage, or how many kilograms of fat mass do I have, and then we get really focused on those which, as you say, can have a massive error rate. Then you might get somebody who's feeling like really motivated, they're making a ton of progress, they're feeling good, and then you go in and you get that scan and it just totally derails you and you think, I was wrong, what was I thinking, I need to change everything up, when in reality, no, you're already doing everything right, it's working. And so that's the danger of putting a lot of stock in those types of numbers and in doing those types of measurements too frequently, because they can be all over the place. And when I was in Florida, I would step on the in-body all the time, just out of curiosity. I'd have the calipers, the ultrasound, and be like, all right, let me, do this measurement on my, I wasn't changing, but, in reality, it wasn't changing. It changed all the time because that's just the nature of it. And so that's really what people need to be aware of.
Yeah, and just to reinforce your point, I think people hear that and they're like, oh, yeah, that sounds fine. Like, conceptually, I get it. But, like, one time I had a great professor in undergrad who he was telling a story about when he was in grad school, he drew the short straw, and they basically said, hey, we got this new BIA device, and we want to just do a little informal experiment. So they basically made him get really dehydrated, like really dehydrated. And they had him step on the scale, took a measurement, and then they just loaded him up with water and so a bunch of sports drinks, Gatorade, all that kind of stuff, And I think he said within the span of less than 24 hours, he had a body fat measurement of 5% body fat and a body fat measurement of 31% body fat. Now, of course, that's very extreme. They were intentionally kind of skewing that, but you get the idea. Like, if you're going to use that kind of technology, the inferences are going to be pretty limited, and that's even if you're kind of applying the most stringent pre-measurement guidelines, which become very, very critical. So absolutely, Lauren, we are in agreement. And body composition, it's a really slippery kind of thing. Like, you can try your best to measure it, but ultimately you want to take a multi-pronged approach that is at least mixed between qualitative and quantitative inputs. All right, Lauren, I think that probably does it for this episode. I'm kind of bummed because there's a lot of good stuff in the outline, but I have reason to believe the world will persist, and we will be back in another week with yet another episode. I think the network will at least give us the grace to get to episode 15 before they pull us off the air.
And I'd like to thank everyone for your emails. We are reading them. We are keeping track of them. We will address them. So if you see a wacky headline or if you have a question, do send us an email at frontpagefitnesspodcast@gmail.com.
All right, folks. Thanks so much for joining us, and we will be back in 1 week with another episode.